Hey, what's going on, everybody? Brent Hyden here, coming at you on this Saturday morning, talking tonight's awesome 9-game slate around the association. Before we dig in, your daily reminder, please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button down below. That way you will get notified whenever I post a brand new video, and those likes go a long way to my videos popping up in search results. If you happen to stumble across this video and you're not already following me on Twitter, make sure you hit that follow button over on the Twitter machine. My handle at BrentHyden1 is in the description down below. While you're doing that, make sure that you send me a direct message to find out how you can get how you can get access to my daily projections all the way through the playoffs. That comes with Discord chat and daily breakdowns as well. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dig into the games. Looking at the first game that we're going to talk about here, Philly at Charlotte. Charlotte 2.5-point favorites, 226 over under. MKG is out for this game. That's really the only injury news that we need to keep an eye on outside of maybe Joel Embiid did bang up his hand a little bit in that game again, in that win against Utah last night. But he said he's good to go, so shouldn't be too much of an issue for him. Joel Embiid is a perfectly fine option. In 2 games against the Hornets already this season, he's averaging 34.5 points, 16.5 rebounds, and 3 blocks. As I've talked about twice now, he is the guy that I expect to be least affected by Jimmy Butler being in the starting lineup. He is 10-7 on DraftKings. He is 11-1 on FanDuel. More of a DraftKings play for cash. He's fine on DraftKings and cash and tournaments. I think I'm going to leave him tournaments only over on FanDuel. Outside of Embiid, it is worth noting Ben Simmons 9K on FanDuel is a pretty good price for tournaments. He's 8,500 on DraftKings, coming off a near triple double. He's been decent against the Hornets so far this season. 18 points, 8 assists, and 10.5 rebounds is what he's averaging against them. I'm fine with him in tournaments. Again, there's going to be nights where he has monster games, and there's going to be nights where he disappears on the offensive end because Jimmy Butler's doing all kinds of work on that offensive end. But in tournaments, he's someone that you can definitely consider. There's a plethora of really good point guards on the slate that are better options for cash though. So in tournaments, Ben Simmons perfectly fine. I do like JJ Redick a significant amount. He is in a pretty good spot here. Charlotte's 1.08 points per possession allowed to spot up shooters. Redick just continues to be priced pretty fairly across the industry, 5,500 over on DraftKings, and he is 5,500 on FanDuel. Just continues to shoot a lot, is playing a decent amount of minutes, putting up a solid amount of points. He kind of has to fall into some of these, assist games and rebound games to have tournament upside, but he's a guy that you feel pretty confident can get you 20 plus fantasy points most nights. So I'm fine with him there. Same with Jimmy Butler. We saw him actually have a really good game against Utah, 12 of 15 from the floor. Perfectly fine in tournaments, not someone that I really want to go to in cash games, but that $7,500 price tag is pretty appealing. So if he ended up in your cash lineup on DraftKings, I wouldn't, call you an idiot for that. FanDuel 8,400, probably not somewhere I want to go. Looking at the Charlotte side of things, obviously Kemba Walker, a fantastic option here, coming in at 9,500 on DraftKings, really expensive. 8,800 on FanDuel. I like him much more on FanDuel at that $8,800 price tag. His usage has come down. It's taken a slight dip. It's down under 30%. He's at 29.3% on the season, coming off a couple down games. But there's the things that have remained constant with him. He's still playing a ton of minutes. He's at least 35 minutes in 7 of the last 10, and he's taking a ton of shots and a ton of three-pointers. I mean, 16, 17, 29, 22, 12, 16, 14, 31, 18, 14. Dude's chucking. He just needs those shots to fall, and if he has one of these, 2 of 16 nights, we're going to hate playing him. But if he has, one of these 9 of 17 nights or 12 of 22 nights, yeah, we're going to be pretty happy. So I like him. I like him in tournaments on DraftKings. I think he's cash viable on FanDuel. I still think there's some better options to look at, and we'll get to those guys here shortly. But I wouldn't say no to some Kimbo Walker exposure. Lamb is fine in all tournaments. We've seen him step up really well recently with MKG being out. Doesn't directly correlate to him, playing better or getting a lot more usage or anything like that. It just shortens that rotation and he gets a couple extra minutes. I'm perfectly fine. Dude's taking a lot of shots, can spot up really well. Which is kind of surprising for Jeremy Lamb. But Philly, 1.11 points per possession allowed on spot ups this season. Jeremy Lamb spotting up on 32% of his possessions, only averaging about 3 points per game, but still, that's a little bit of a boost to him. So is kind of his shot profile. Philly allowing allowing opponents to shoot almost 44% in the mid-range. Lamb, 39% of his shots come in the mid-range. So this is still a pretty good spot for him tonight. So I'm fine with him in cash and in tournaments. That $5,100 price tag on DraftKings, very, very affordable. And he's still fairly priced over here on FanDuel as well at $5,400. So sites have not caught up to him. So I like him a lot. Bridges burned us. Burned us last time, pun intended. I'm fine with him in tournaments as a value option. There's going to be better guys that I'm going to talk about tonight, so I'm fine if you want to roll him out in tournaments, but there's really not a whole lot to love with him. Borrego's once again going to throw all of his big men at Embiid, pulling up the game logs. I think Biyombo even got in that game last time. Yeah, Biyombo played 5 minutes. It was Hernan Gomez, though, that actually got a decent amount of run. Last time these teams played, 20 minutes, put up 25.5 fantasy points. On DraftKings, if you need a punt center option to make your lineups work and you're playing in tournaments, I'm fine with that. If he gets you 25 fantasy points, you're pretty happy about that. 4,100 on FanDuel doesn't really fit the criteria of a punt play. There's a couple guys that should fit that criteria a little bit more, but I'm fine with that. I also really like Marvin Williams here. 4,500. We talked about it last night with Philly. They struggle against stretch fours. We saw Derek Favors torch them in the first half last night and then do nothing in the second half. I don't want to talk about it. But he's a guy that I think can have a solid game here. Again, I talked about Philly struggling against spot-up shooters. Marvin Williams is spotting up on 41.7 of his possessions this season. 26% of his shots come in the mid-range where, again, opponents are shooting 43.8% against the Sixers. I think Marvin Williams is a perfectly fine value option on both sites. And Cody Zeller in cash is fine. Obviously, it's really scary taking a big man against Joel Embiid, but he consistently gets you right around that 20-plus fantasy point mark. So I am fine with that. And Tony Parker, perfectly fine in all formats. Nothing really too terribly exciting with Tony Parker. Atlanta at Indiana. Indiana 11.5 point favorites in this one. 219 over under. Oladipo coming off a season low 8 points last night. Had scored at least 20 in his previous 13 games. It was Tyreek Evans who went off. Hit 5 3-pointers, scored 23 points. Their bench did a lot of damage. They had 53 points on 19 of 34 shooting against the Heat last night. I have some interest in the Indiana side of this game. Not really that interested in the Atlanta side of this game. I'll touch on those guys really, really quickly because with Taurean Prince out, that's going to open things up just a little bit, but they're also getting John Collins back potentially, which takes some minutes away from some of these guys. But Trae Young, absolutely atrocious matchup, coming off really, really, really bad games. Like, I don't even want to pull up his game log because it's so atrocious, but he's 4 for 23 from the floor over the last 2 games, and he's missed all 9 of his 3-pointers. So when I say it's bad, it's bad. That being said, without Prince on the floor this season, 32.7% usage rate, 1.21 fantasy points per minute. He's really cheap on DraftKings at 6,600. What is he over here on FanDuel? 7,400. On DraftKings, if you're building a handful of lineups, maybe 1 or 2 Trae Young lineups. Probably 1 if you're doing like 5, maybe 2 if you're doing like 20. It wouldn't be a terrible move there. Bazemore, Lynn, Bembry all get a little bit of a boost. Talking Jeremy Lin, not Alex Lynn. With Indiana struggling to defend the pick and roll, that's a little bit of a boost for Trae Young. All these guys are just they're just guys tonight. They're not people that I'm trying to force in my lineups. Same with like Kevin Herter. If you need a value option, especially on FanDuel where he's absolute minimum salary and you can drop his score, like I'm just fine with them all. They're not guys where I'm just dying to get them in my lineup. But Jeremy Lin is really cheap, so if you think this game blows out, which newsflash, it's going to blow out. Um, Jeremy Lin, a guy that you could expect to get some minutes here. So I'm not going to hate like some Jeremy Lin value exposure here. Um, I do like Alex Lynn as a cheap option, but again, with even though Collins does play the power forward position, Alex Lynn could take a little bit of a hit with John Collins potentially coming back in the spot just because it shortens the rotation for everybody. On the Indiana side of things, Turner, boy, he looked good last night. Was not expecting that, but 28 minutes, 12.7 rebounds, even got some assists in there. Blocks and steals, kind of what he does most nights. But he is in line for a decent amount of blocks whenever you consider there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players. 6 players in this, 7 players in this Atlanta offense that take about 40% of their shots at the rim. Miles Turner, 4,600. If you can ignore these games 20, 18, 18, 16, 20, and just focus on the good games where he put up like 30 fantasy points, Miles Turner, a pretty interesting option tonight on DraftKings at 4,600. FanDuel, 5,400, where those blocks and steals mean a little bit more. He's cash viable on FanDuel, that's for sure. Center's kind of weird with the way the pricing works out tonight, so I think he's cash viable, definitely tournament viable on FanDuel, but over on DraftKings, it might be kind of hard to get away from Miles Turner at that price tag, so definitely not hating on some Miles Turner here. Outside of Turner, Oladipo, 31% usage rate, really appealing. Hawks ranked 27th in defensive efficiency to shooting guards. He burned everybody last night. His price, I think, went up. Yeah, his price went up. He burned everyone last night. This is a good time to get back on the Oladipo train. The biggest concern I have is maybe his minutes get shortened by like 3 or 4 because of a blowout, because this game's going to blow out. But I'm still fine with him in all formats. Let's see over here on FanDuel. 10K, whew, that's tough. More of a tournament play on FanDuel. A little bit closer to cash on DraftKings, but still a very solid tournament option. Tyreek, have to talk about Tyreek. Played outstanding last night. I wrote up my love for Tyreek before he just went completely bonkers in this spot. I still really like him. He's 3,900. He's going to get right around 18 to 20 minutes, probably more when this game blows out. I have a lot of interest in Tyreek. I'm going back to the well with Tyreek Evans here. Atlanta really struggles with transition defense. They're allowing opponents to score 1.19 points per possession in transition this season. Tyreek Evans, 24.4% of his possessions come in transition. So that bodes really well for him. And then on above the break threes, opponents are shooting almost 41% against the Hawks. And 29% of Tyreek Evans' shots are above the break threes. So it's a pretty good spot. And you see these games where he shot 0 of 2 from 3, 0 of 3 from 3, 0 of 2 from 3. He's going to shoot better than these numbers suggest. He's probably not going to shoot 71% from 3, but still, he can get you 15, 16 real points, and some peripherals and easily crush that $3,900 salary. So I have a lot of interest in Tyreek Evans, 3,900 on DraftKings and 4,200 on FanDuel. He's a little bit pricey for that, punt type player, but that's still a really fair price for him. So I'm fine with that. And then I guess we still have to talk about Domantas Sabonis, who looked really good last night. Once again, 15 points, 12 rebounds. I'm fine with him in tournaments on FanDuel, and he is still pretty fairly priced at 6,400 on DraftKings. I'm fine with him in cash there because you're going to get the double bonus because he's probably going to double. Moving on to a very appealing game, Lakers at Magic. Lakers 4.5 point favorites, 222 over under. Rajon Rondo is out for this game, and that means our boy Lonzo Ball 5,400 on DraftKings, and probably like center eligible on FanDuel, 5,600 on FanDuel. Yeah, if you're not playing Lonzo Ball tonight, you're doing it all wrong. I don't care if he's going to be 100% owned. Lonzo Ball is the closest thing to a lock for me that I will ever get, and anybody that's in my chat knows I hate calling a player a lock. But Lonzo Ball at that price is pretty damn close to a lock. Orlando ranks 21st in defensive efficiency to point guards. They're giving up 24.7 points, 6.1 rebounds, 7.9 assists, and 46.7% shooting to the position. He's just way too underpriced. That's all it really comes down to. Without Rajon Rondo in the lineup, Lonzo Ball is going to get 30-plus minutes. He should be well over 6K given the matchup. So Lonzo Ball, core option for me, damn near close to a lock. LeBron, 30.2% usage rate, 1.53 fantasy points per minute. Without Rajon Rondo on the floor this season, it's LeBron. 11-2 coming off a monster game. Looking at it last season, let me see this because I just saw it come across my Twitter timeline. Where did it go? During his second tour with the Cavaliers, LeBron James played 14 games against the Magic. Cavs went 12-2 in those games, and LeBron averaged 23.4 points, 6.9 rebounds, 8.4 assists, and 3 turnovers per game. Obviously, he's not with the Cavaliers anymore. That being said, LeBron James can still absolutely smash. We saw it last game whenever I said I didn't think he had upside out for tournaments, and he drops 80 fantasy points. LeBron James could easily drop 80 fantasy points any night. Probably not going to happen tonight, but LeBron James in cash in tournaments, I'm fine with it. Brandon Ingram and Kuzma, there might as well just be like one blob of a player. Amorphic, is that the word? I don't know. But neither stands out like as a really good option. I will say Orlando does struggle in isolation. They're allowing 1.11 points per possession in isolation. 13% of Ingram's shots possessions are in isolation. 45% of his shots come in the mid-range. Opponents are shooting 46.4% against Orlando in the mid-range. That gives them a slight edge over Kuzma, but it's not like a monster edge. Price considered, I would save the 100, I guess, and go with Ingram on FanDuel. I guess Ingram on DraftKings, like these guys, they're just the same player basically. Neither just stands out as a great option. JaVale, fine in tournaments. Orlando really bad against centers, but he's basically splitting minutes with Tyson Chandler, so that makes him a little less appealing. 6K on DraftKings. I like him more on FanDuel at 6,500, where those blocks mean a little bit more. And then Tyson Chandler on FanDuel is a fine punt option. On to the Orlando side, DJ Augustin. I talk about it night in, night out. He continues to be a solid cash game option. Probably not someone you need to go to tonight, but if he fits your lineup, he's going to get you 20 plus most nights. So Lakers do rank 20th in defensive efficiency to point guards. 38.8% of his possessions come in the pick and roll, where Lakers are allowing 0.90 points per possession. It's a good spot for him, so I'm fine with him in pretty much all formats. Lakers rank 28th in defensive efficiency to centers. Vucevic, 8,600 on FanDuel. 8,400 on DraftKings, coming off a really solid game against Philly. Really consistent option here. I love him in all formats. Yeah, I love Vucevic. Not going to be. I don't think he's going to be a core option for me, but he's someone that I do have a lot of interest in. Um, Fournier, his price has gone down a little bit, and that has me interested in him quite a bit, actually. He is down to 5,600 on DraftKings and 6,100 on FanDuel. Leads the team in usage still, 25.5%. Not like that's a lot, but still pretty good numbers here. Lakers really bad against shooting guards. This is a good spot for Fournier. He's going to take a lot of shots as long as this game stays close. I like him in all formats. Outside of him, Bamba and AG, Aaron Gordon, perfectly fine option. 8K for Aaron Gordon, not terribly appealing in this spot, especially with Jonathan Isaac being back. He does take a little bit of a hit to his rebounding and scoring upside. Jonathan Isaac at 3,600. Don't expect him to play a ton of minutes. I would imagine they keep him right around the 20-minute mark. But if we get word that he's not going to be limited and he's going to get regular minutes, he's sold at 3,600. I definitely want to get some tournament exposure too. And then Terrence Ross, still perfectly fine in cash and tournaments. Let's see, what is the next game in my notes? We have Denver, New Orleans Pelicans. New Orleans 1.5 point favorites, 227.5 over under. Elfrid Payton broke one of his fingers last night. Still listed questionable for this game. Alvin Gentry says he's day to day, so that's something that we're gonna have to keep an eye on. Torrey Craig questionable for this game. Probably not gonna play, but that really doesn't matter. It's an excellent spot for the Nuggets. That really starts with Nikola Jokic. New Orleans 21st in defensive efficiency to centers, 22.1 points, 15.9 rebounds, 3.8 assists, 53.8% shooting, and 39.4% shooting from three allowed. Has played limited minutes against them in the past. Dating back to 2017, he did average 1.51 fantasy points per minute against them. Way too cheap at 9,200 for the upside that he has. He is way too cheap at 9,600 for the upside he has. It is very possible he comes out and gives us one of these 40 point floor games, but it is also possible he comes out and gives us one of these 72 fantasy point games. I'm leaning more towards him being in the mid 40s range, but I'm still fine with that in the spot because he still has monster upside, and I absolutely love him in all formats. Going to be someone that I'm going to be trying to get exposure to. Outside of him, I really like Jamal Murray. Pelicans allowing 1.17 points per possession in isolation. 11% of his possessions do come in isolation. My notes are confusing me. Where is he? In isolation. I wrote in transition in my notes. Don't ask me why. But yeah, I like Jamal Murray. He's pretty cheap. He is 6,300 on DraftKings, 7,400 on FanDuel. Better DraftKings play, especially at that price. I don't know why they dropped his price. I mean, he hasn't been playing great, but this is still a good spot for him, and I still really like him, especially in tournaments. Going to be back in the starting lineup. He was being disciplined because he was a bad boy. Yeah, he's cash viable, I think, on DraftKings. More of a tournament play on FanDuel. Gary Harris, 6K. I love him in cash on DraftKings. Gary Harris is 7K on FanDuel and small forward eligible. He's fine in tournaments. Millsap, excellent option here. Playing really well. Still playing limited minutes, but coming off another monster game. I mean, it was a revenge game, so I guess we should have seen that one coming. But he's fine in all formats. Not someone I'm forcing into my lineups, but if he fits your cash game or tournament lineup, perfectly fine with it. It's going to be harder for him to hit that ceiling, I think, so he's better suited for cash. But he's still fine. Hernan Gomez, coming off a really solid game. People are going to chase it. 4,100 on DraftKings is a fair price for him. 4,100 on FanDuel. I like him more on FanDuel just about every single night because there's going to be nights where he just is the 5th or 6th scoring option and he's just not going to have a shot to put up monster games. But the Pelicans allowing 1.23 points per possession on spot ups. Hernan Gomez spotting up 46.2% of the time. That's a lot. So Hernan Gomez, perfectly fine if you want to roll him out tonight. Still, I think he's better suited for FanDuel. Nuggets, excellent defense. They're only allowing 102.1 points per game. No one really stands out as like, oh my God, I want to squeeze him in my lineup play. Anthony Davis, 12-6 on FanDuel. Whew, that's steep. 11-1 on DraftKings. I like him more on DraftKings, but again, we're on a slate where we have Kevin Durant with no Curry and no Draymond. We have James Harden. We have LeBron James. Really, really tough to imagine forcing Anthony Davis in my lineup, but it's a good spot for him. So if you're building a bunch of lineups, he's perfectly fine if you want to get some exposure there. I don't expect Elfrid Payton to play. I don't really think it matters. You're not changing too much here. Drew Holiday, I don't know how many times I have to tell you guys, he's still an excellent cash game option regardless of who's playing, because he's going to come out and get you pretty much 40 fantasy points every single night. 8,900 on FanDuel. I like the price there. 8,100 on DraftKings. Love the price there. He's fine in tournaments too. Denver really good against shooting guards. They're really good against just about every position, but he's just underpriced for his floor. Mirotic is fine on DraftKings at 7,100. Not someone I really want to get a ton of exposure to on FanDuel at 7,900. He's still really underpriced on DraftKings for his floor. But again, no one's like jumps off the page as just an oh my God, they have to be in my lineups play from Denver. Wesley Johnson gonna get some more run. We get 30 minutes of Wesley Johnson. I'm happy with that in tournaments. Again, not someone where you have to force him, but 3,600, he's a decent punt option on FanDuel. Utah at Boston. Woo. Boston 4.5 point favorites, 207.5 over under. I do not have a lot of interest in this game. I just don't care to cram a bunch of players from what's going to be a very defensive heavy game with a 207.5 over under into my lineups. I will say Kyrie Irving coming off a monster game. I'm glad I called him a core option yesterday. He's been absolutely killing it since he got his haircuts. Over his last 5 games, let me see. Actually, last 8 games, 28.5 points per game, but his numbers since his haircut are even better. I just don't have him in my notes because I've put him in there like the past 3 games. I love Kyrie Irving in all formats. This is a matchup against a Utah team. He's the kind of point guard that we expect to be able to take advantage of their defensive deficiency. He can get to the rim really well. Utah allowing opponents to shoot 64.4% at the rim. He can score, in the mid-range. Opponents are shooting 44.5% in the mid-range, and Utah really struggling at times against the pick and roll, and he can, take advantage there. He's still really, really cheap, way too cheap for the upside he has in this matchup at 7,700 and 8,500. I like him in all formats. Very, very close to a core option for me, but there's still someone that I like even more. So that's similarly priced. So yeah, Tatum has upside for tournaments, but I don't not go in the rest of this Boston stuff. Mitchell, cheap on DraftKings. We've talked about Boston struggling to defend high usage scores. We saw it last night with Kawhi Leonard. I'm fine with Donovan Mitchell and GPPs. Really cool that he took 35 shots and didn't have a single assist last night. Really cool, Donovan Mitchell. Maybe you could have passed the ball to Derek Favors a couple more times, but he's fine pretty much in all formats. Crowder's really cheap. Continues to be just a guy that consistently gets you, a decent return on his salary. Has struggled the last couple of games. Saw him go off against Boston last time out. It is a revenge game back at Boston, so there is that for you. I skipped over Gordon Hayward, his revenge game. He's probable to play in this one. Had 13.7 assists in his return to Utah last week. I think Jay Crowder's revenge is a little bit more than Gordon Hayward's is, considering this one's in Boston. But yeah, Gobert's fine in tournaments. Boston struggling on the boards, 47.4 rebounds per game allowed to opponents. Yeah, that game just not really appealing. On to one that is very, very appealing. We have Toronto at Chicago. Toronto only 7-point favorites in this one, 220.5 over under. Kawhi doubtful because it's a back-to-back. CJ Miles is out. Norman Powell is out. OG Anunoby questionable for this game. Left yesterday's game with a wrist injury, was not able to return, and that's going to open up a handful of minutes for people. Raptors already shorthanded. This is a spot where I want to have a lot of Raptors exposure. Kyle Lowry, 27.7% usage rate, 1.52 fantasy points per minute without Kawhi Leonard on the floor this season. If you are not playing Kyle Lowry against the Bulls at 8K on FanDuel and 7,800 on Draftkings, I don't know what you're doing. So we basically, especially in cash, we've already locked in our 2-point guards with Lonzo Ball and Kyle Lowry. Those are two guys where I am just locking and loading in my lineups tonight. Outside of those guys, outside of Lowry, Serge Ibaka, 27.2% usage. Again, 1.52 fantasy points per minute without Kawhi Leonard. He's old. They played an overtime game. It is a back-to-back. I do have a little bit of concern about Serge Ibaka. He just missed a game with some knee soreness. So I would keep an eye on the news, but they kind of need him to play here. So that concerns me a little bit, and that makes me want to roll out Pascal Siakam a little bit more. 1.15 fantasy points per minute without Leonard. Gonna play a lot of minutes. Let me see, what do I have him projected for? He is projected for... I'm in it for 34 minutes, 34 fantasy points. I have Ibaka in for 28 minutes, 34, 35 fantasy points. So pretty similar projected point totals, more minutes for Siakam. So I'm going to lean Siakam over Ibaka on both sites. Siakam 6,200 over on DraftKings. Siakam 6,500 over on FanDuel. The one saving grace for Ibaka is he has center eligibility on DraftKings, so you could use both if you really want to. Outside of those guys, Fred VanVleet's dealing with an injury. Nick Nurse said he's not 100%, and he wants to get him some rest at the end of this road trip. That's very concerning. Still played in the 22 minutes. Still playing the same amount of minutes he's playing most nights. He's just shooting like absolute trash. That concerns me. I think DeLon Wright is a guy we have to consider in this spot. Played 26 minutes last night. I did not pull up the rotations to see if any of that was in overtime. Let me pull that up real quick. Chicago. No, that's not the game I wanted to look at. It's awkward. The silence is pretty cool, isn't it? Why do we not have the rotations? What is going on? Yeah, I can't. The site that I use for rotations, Popcorn Machine doesn't have them, and NBA Rotations doesn't have the overtime period. So that's cool. Good job, everybody, keeping up with the information. People absolutely need to do their jobs. So yeah, I can't pull that up right now. But that being said, I think DeLon Wright probably gets more run, especially if this game blows out, which there's a decent chance it does. But like with Anunoby potentially missing this game, that shortens the rotation. That gives more minutes. to some of the guards. So it's a really good spot for DeLon Wright. He's one of my favorite value options on the slate. Looking at the Chicago side of things, Levine has really struggled recently. It's lowered his price. 9 of 31 over the last 2 games. Still putting up decent numbers across the board with rebounds and assists. He's fine in tournaments. I just don't want to play Chicago. They're just bad. Like, this team is just really bad. Arcidiacono, not someone I have interest in. Really, really struggling to find anything I like on the Chicago side of this game. Like, there's just nothing to really like. Levine in tournaments is fine. Parker in tournaments is fine. Wendell Carter in tournaments is fine. He's still not getting minutes. I don't know what's going on. Like, Chicago's just a freaking train wreck. Let's just move on. Sacramento at Houston. Houston 12-point favorites, 220 over under. If you guys didn't know, James Harden is really good at basketball. If you can afford to get him in your lineups, feel free. I absolutely love him in the spot, but I think there's better places to go with the Houston side of this game, and that starts with Clint Capella. Kings are giving up 1.29 points per possession to the roll man, and Capella operating in the pick and roll 20% of the time. I absolutely love Clint Capella. They're also giving up, 50 rebounds per game, 15.8 second chance points, 53.8 points in the paint, and 65% shooting at the rim. Hello, Clint Capella. Love this spot for him. Plenty of upside, cash games, tournaments, really, really good spots. So I really like him in here, 8,100. FanDuel center pricing is just way too weird this season, but I still really like him. Gary Clark, one of the value options to consider, very up and down so far this season. Still going to get a lot of minutes. I like him a lot in this spot. Kings, just the pace of this game really bodes well for all of Houston. James Ennis, though, I talked about one of the guys being just kind of a lock at value. 3,800. FanDuel just hasn't adjusted. He continues to be very up and down, but his last 2 games have been very up. Hopefully he doesn't have a down game in this one. It's a good spot for him. But I think especially on FanDuel where you need a value play to make your lineups work, he's one of the better ones on the slate, especially at small forward tonight. I like PJ Tucker in cash. Continues to be a guy that can get you in the mid-20s, consistently playing a lot of minutes. I expect him to play a ton of minutes tonight. He's fine in cash. Chris Paul, 9,100 on DraftKings or FanDuel, pretty fair price for him there. At 8,200, I like the price on DraftKings a little bit more. Consistent floor guy, has an opportunity to notch double-digit assist, even with James Harden doing a ton of work. Going to shoot a lot. It's fine. Like, he doesn't stand out as a great play, but really, really like him. If you're not going to get exposure to like Kyle Lowry or Kyrie Irving. But yeah, I think that's everyone from that side. I guess Eric Gordon, not in my notes, but at 4,900, that's a pretty appealing price tag. Just needs to hit his shots. If he's not hitting his shots, he's going to suck. But looking at the Sacramento side of things, De'Aaron Fox, very, very cheap over on DraftKings. I love him in tournaments at 6,900 on DraftKings. If you're on FanDuel, 8,100 in this matchup, yeah, not going there. But 6,900, very nice. Again, best suited for tournaments. Houston does struggle to defend in the paint. They're allowing 1.48 points per possession to the roll man in the pick and roll and 68% shooting at the rim. That means Willie Cauley-Stein, who is operating as the roll man, 23% of his possessions and taking about 66% of his shots at the rim, a very, very good option here. If you're playing on DraftKings, it's not a terrible idea to play De'Aaron Fox and Willie Cauley-Stein together, because guess what? When these two guys are operating in the pick and roll, it's going to be a lot of De'Aaron Fox throwing the ball to Willie Cauley-Stein, gives him a chance for some assists. So those two together in tournaments on DraftKings is a really, really solid option. Willie Cauley-Stein on FanDuel, a perfectly fine cash and tournament center option there. Bogdan expected to play about 25 minutes again tonight. him being in the lineup is kind of hurting the value of Bielitsa and Marvin Bagley and Buddy Hield. So I'm not really interested in any of those guys, but I am kind of interested in Bogdan. Uh, it's a decent spot for him. Coming in at 4,300. Excellent tournament option here, I think. Double-digit shot attempts in the last 2 games. It's a pretty good spot for Bogdan. I kind of have a little bit of interest in him in tournaments. But outside of that, it's not a whole lot to like. Moving on, Golden State at Dallas. Golden State, 4.5-point favorites. 4.5-point favorites, 216.5 over under. Warriors without Curry and without Green. So I expect Quinn Cook to move back into the starting lineup. I think the Iguodala starting thing was just a matchup type thing against the Rockets. Without Curry and without Green on the floor this season, Quinn Cook, 27.8% usage rate, 1.09 fantasy points per minute. I love him on Draftkings at 5,400. He's fine at 5,900 on FanDuel, but I prefer Lonzo Ball. That being said, if you're not getting any other Golden State exposure in this spot, you could pivot Lonzo to Quinn Cook if you're not getting any other Golden State exposure. The other Golden State exposure that you should probably be looking at is Kevin Durant. 40.1% usage rate, 1.64 fantasy points per minute without Green and Steph on the floor. 11-4 FanDuel, 10-6 DraftKings. Yeah, you can just fade him at your own risk. I am always advocating to build a balanced lineup, and I am probably going to be forcing Kevin Durant in my lineups tonight. That usage is way too tough to overlook. Outside of him, Clay and GPPs is fine. A little over a fantasy point per minute without Curry and Green on the floor. Going to take a lot of shots. I like him in the spot. Dallas ranks 30th in defensive efficiency to shooting guards. It's a fine spot for Clay. So in tournaments, if you're fading Cook and you're fading Durant on like FanDuel, it might be a good idea to get some Klay Thompson exposure. On DraftKings, same thing. Pretty good idea to get some exposure to Klay Thompson in tournaments if you're fading Cook or Durant. Jonas Jerebko likely gets a start in place of Green. Excellent value play here. Not really in love with it. Dallas really good against power forwards this season. They're really good on the boards. That kind of hurts the upside of Jerebko, but it's still a pretty decent spot. 51% of his shots are from 3-point range. Dallas opponents are shooting over 40% from 3 against them, so that's a boost for him. Again, we talked about Cook, Klay Thompson. That's a boost for those guys as well. I think he's fine in cash and in tournaments. It's going to be interesting to see. I don't know how Dallas is going to handle this because Golden State, like Damian Jones is not like a big man. He's not like a big center. And against DeAndre Jordan, that concerns me. So Damian Jones is off the table. I'm just never going to play this guy. He just doesn't have upside. He's probably dropping 50 fantasy points tonight now that I said that. But I do think that Kevon Looney could be a very good tournament option here. I think they use him at center more than Damian Jones to help battle against DeAndre Jordan. He's just better defensively. He just fits this matchup a little bit better. So I think Kevon Looney in tournaments is a really good option. But yeah, on to the Dallas side of things. Without Wesley Matthews, Barea going to get some extra minutes, averaging 1.30 fantasy points per minute with a 27.2% usage rate without Matthews on the floor this season. I have him in about 22 minutes, which is kind of where I expect him to settle in. He's priced up a little bit, but he's still a guy with just so much upside. In cash, I love him. In tournaments, I think you can fade him, but I really like him in cash games. Outside of that, Dennis Smith Jr., really cheap, 5,300. It's an interesting matchup for him. 1 second. Coffee. it is an interesting matchup for him. Golden State allowing 69% shooting at the rim. He takes a lot of shots at the rim. 38% of his shots come at the rim. Tournaments only because he has been losing minutes because he hasn't been playing very well. And when, when freaking JJ Barea is out there cooking, Carlisle is going to play Barea over DSJ. So, but with Matthews being out, that's going to shorten the rotation. You might get a little more Jalen Brunson. You're going to get a little bit more Devin Harris. Neither of those guys is very appealing. I still think Dennis Smith Jr. in tournaments, perfectly fine option here. Golden State allowing 1.19 points per possession in transition. Doncic, 20% of his possessions come in transition. Unfortunately, he is point guard only for whatever freaking reason. Even though he has played absolutely no minutes as the point guard, DraftKings still leaves him at point guard. He's shooting guard eligible on FanDuel. I can't fit him in any of my lineups, but he makes a good tournament option. Barnes, really, really good option here. 29.7% usage rate, 1.07 fantasy points per minute without Matthews. Coming off a couple of down games, a little fewer minutes. Oh, wait, no, not down games. Has been killing it, actually. I looked at the wrong box score, apparently. But revenge game for Harrison Barnes, 5,700. Yeah, get you some Harry B in your life. And I'm not talking about the One Direction guy. That's the right guy, right? Yeah, I think so. DeAndre Jordan is fine in tournaments. There's a possibility that they play him off the floor, and that concerns me. But if he gets, 24, 25 minutes, he should absolutely smash that $6,600 salary. So he's fine in all formats, or fine in tournaments, not in cash. I think Dwight Powell, and Maxi Kleber, interesting tournament option. Powell, the guy that I think is the most interesting tournament option from the Dallas side of things at 3,500. Moving on, last game of the night. This one will be quick. OKC at Phoenix. OKC 5.5 point favorites, 216.5 over under. Alex Abrinas was sick yesterday. I think he was just taking part in a Pokemon raid group because he does that kind of thing. I actually have proof. But he's questionable for this game. Russell Westbrook is out, but he's been practicing and going through shoot-arounds, and I think he might actually play in this game. Hopefully we get that news early on. And then Trevor Ariza is out for this game. If Russell is indeed out for this game, back to Dennis Schroeder, 31% usage rate, 1.14 fantasy points per minute, and Paul George, 32.4% usage rate, 1.33 fantasy points per minute without Russell Westbrook on the floor. George, second straight 30-point game last time out against the Knicks. Schroeder, 15 points, 12 assists in his last game. Both these guys played really well against Phoenix just a couple of games ago. As we can see here, Phoenix, 36 minutes for Schroeder, 48 fantasy points, 29-5 with those 4 steals. Paul George played really well too. 36 minutes, 32 points. Didn't get any steals, which is uncharacteristic for Paul George. That would have given him a monster game. But I like Paul George and Dennis Schroeder in all formats. Jeremy Grant's fine in cash. Guy without a ton of monster ceiling, but gonna play a lot of minutes. Gonna get you in that 20 fantasy point mark. If he can notch a couple extra rebounds, more power to him. I really like Steven Adams here. Just a good spot for him. Phoenix, one of the worst teams in the league against centers. 7,200, kind of tough to pay that price for him, but more of a cash game option. Shooting 26 of 37 from the floor over his last 3 games. So I like him pretty much in all formats, but probably more of a tournament option. If Abrinas does miss this game because he was not able to catch that rare Pokemon, Hamidou Diallo, a name to keep an eye on. I would expect him to get some more minutes. And he's the type of guy that could have a monster game if he gets a couple extra minutes. So if Abrinas misses this game, Hamidou what I want and put Diallo in my lineups. On the Phoenix side of things, Trevor Ariza, again, I mentioned he's going to be out. Booker is going to be someone that I have interest in just because of his usage and his role in the offense. It is interesting to note he did notch like 12 assists or something like that in his last game. Where do I have it here? Yeah, career high 12 assists on Wednesday. That's pretty promising to see. Um, he still has monster upside. More of a tournament option though. 7,700 fair price. He has a mid 30 fantasy point floor, but plenty of upside. I can't pay 8K for a guy that might only get me like 35 fantasy points. So at least not in cash. So in tournaments for sure. TJ Warren continues to play a ton of minutes. Draws a little bit of a tough matchup, but 37 plus minutes in every game since being inserted to the starting lineup, and at least 14 field goal attempts in each. Minutes are going to be there for him again tonight with Trevor Ariza being out, so great cash game option with tournament upside. Bridges is a very solid tournament value, but I've already talked about a bunch of other guys in that same price range that I like a little bit more, so probably not going there. And then DeAndre Ayton, still tournaments only for me there. But that does it. That's the entire slate, all 9 games. Hopefully you enjoyed this podcast and podcast video, whatever you want to call this. And I will be back on Monday for a pretty nice looking slate. Good luck in all your contests tonight.